Right. All right, what's going on, fishing friends? We are here with our good friend Walleye Pete. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I am absolutely good. Enjoying the nice day. Driving from Southern Maryland up here to Kent Island, and life is good.
Well, for those that are tuning in that don't know who you are, can you talk about Walleye Pete? You know, uh,
I don't do that very often, but okay, I'll do that. I'm a fishing guide and have been doing it for over 23 years, over 4,000 trips. The walleye thing, a lot of people ask that. The Walleye Pete name came from upstate New York. I was in upstate New York fishing walleyes, came to Maryland on Chesapeake Bay, fell in love with Chesapeake Bay, and then I needed a handle on the radio, so I called myself Walleye Pete. So Walleye Pete came from that, and I've been guiding a long time, retired military in '04, been full-time guiding ever since, and never have looked back. Love every second.
Hi, Charlotte. Pete's wife is logged in.
Hi, Charlotte.
So, you do a very particular kind of fishing, kind of fishing that you and really only one or two other guys really got going here on the bay. It's light tackle, targeting a lot of saltwater game fish. What got you into light tackle fishing?
I grew up light tackle fishing in upstate New York for stream trout, for walleyes, and my dad walked streams with me as a little kid. I was young. He was showing me how to read current, and if I didn't read the current and get the cast to where it needed to be, I didn't catch fish. So I grew up doing that. My dad, jokingly, I declare he abused me because he would catch fish behind me. And as a trout fisherman, if someone catches a fish behind you, that's wrong on every level. But my dad taught me that way, and I'm forever grateful for that. So when I moved to Maryland, I went over to the eastern shore in the skinny water, the shallow water, and I saw current, and my eyes lit up like, oh my God, this is like trout fishing in upstate New York, except it's saltwater fish. So I immediately started to read water and started being successful right away when I was not a guide, catching stripers and started to catch speckled sea trout over in those shallow water islands. And then light tackle also, it moves over to the deeper water also. It's current structure, but in a little different angle. But anyway, I love the shallow water Chesapeake Bay remote beauty, and I do that 5 months out of the year. And then for 3 months or so, I'm chasing reds and cobia and Spanish max and bluefish and all the stuff in Chesapeake Bay, all on light tackle. I grew up on light tackle and love it.
Well, so a lot of people look at the kind of fishing that you do and the imaging, the pictures that you upload on Facebook, and they probably have questions of how you do it. You're off in remote waters. What do you think is the secret to your success?
All right. And see, he's hitting me with, I didn't know what any questions were. And that's a very good question. If a guy asked me that at one of my seminars, the secret is knowing your water. That's a secret. And knowing, the conditions. I fish conditions. So if the water's not clear, if the water level's not where it needs to be, if the water color is dirty or clean, there's a big difference. And there's a big difference in my success based on conditions. So I fish conditions and I fish in patterns. And if the patterns aren't, if there's no fish in the area I'm at, I have to move. So I burn a lot of gas too. So one of my secrets is burning gas. Knowing my water, I preach. If you are going to a new area, Grant, and you don't know that area, but I've told you about it at a seminar or while we're sitting here, you need to go to that area and pick a small area and concentrate on that area and learn the water. If you're on a nice looking point with currents, but you don't catch fish there, don't think it's not a great spot. It is a great spot. All great spots don't produce fish all the time. But what you need to do after you fish that spot, slide your little boat right over that spot and look at the lay of the land under the water. Look at the depth. Look at if there's stumps. Look, be careful. You might bump off a stump. You only go as fast over there as you want to hit something. So you got to be very careful, know your water, examine and dissect little sections at a time so that the next time you come, you know that area, and then you can dissect another area and another. And before you know it, from the chop tank down to Smith Island. It takes a few years. It took me a few years. And a few broken prop shafts and props and toes and money. But I don't regret any of it.
Well, you've been guiding on the Chesapeake Bay now for 20 plus years, right?
20. I started in the year 2000, and now it's 23. So yeah.
What sorts of changes have you seen in the time that you've been guiding on the bay? What, in terms of the species that we see, in terms of the style of fishing?
Okay, changes. Here's changes physically. The islands of the Eastern Shore are remote, and they're sod. And what happens to that sod is when the wind blows into them 24/7, they erode away. So the lay of the land changes every single year gigantically. And you can look at it on Google Earth Pro on a computer. You can scroll back. You can zoom in on an area, and you can look at the current date, and then you can scroll back through the years, and it's amazing at how that area has changed. So as a fishing guide, my spot this year might stink next year because the lay of the land changes. So you don't have that current funneling over a hump. Now you got it funneling less over that hump, and the water is eroded back, and now you got a new current rip, or more stumps have been uncovered from where the water has gone over the islands. Just new stuff all the time. So I have to ever evolve in identifying new areas every single year. So that changes a lot. As far as the fish go, striped bass. There used to be that many migratory striped bass giants. Now I think there's that many. So what that means to me is there's less migratory striped bass. So they're only in some areas for short periods of time, and they're not widespread. What happens is their range, there used to be in a giant range, big, and now they're in a small range. But when you're inside that range, life is good. They're all there. But what's the biggest thing I've seen is where they're not. So they're great here, but they're not great where they used to be. So less population of striped bass means you got to identify areas where 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of the water is where all the fish are, at least in my world. So that has changed. Speckled sea trout and redfish and cobia, they are migratory, and in the world I live in, and this isn't science, just my opinion based on experience on the water, they're migratory. They change, every year. They might show up, they might not show up. Who the heck knows exactly what's going to happen? So every year you have to adapt and overcome the changes every year on these migratory fish. Specks, starting when the water's 50, they start showing up in our area. At 60, they start to bite well. And then 60 to 70, it's great. 70 to 80, hot water, they'll hit the top. But every year is different based on, how many specks can die in the winter too in the southern waters. They have hills on specks. If the water's really cold, really fast, they can die. So we're at the mercy of migratory fish. Redfish, they've been pretty consistent coming up the bay. So, out of the Point Lookout region and south of Virginia and sometimes north of Solomons, we can have reds. But every year it's different. Cobia, brand new in our region over the last 10 years. So every year is different with them too. So everything changes every year with the fish, the migratories, and then the population of stripers is diminished, and the structure changes year to year where I fish because of erosion, and it's natural erosion. It is not water level rising, Right. So anyway, natural stuff.
We're seeing right now a record warm winter.
Yeah.
In your experience from the 23 years that you've been guiding on the Chesapeake Bay, what is that really warm winter? How does that project into the next season?
Well, if it stays warm, because water can go up and down quick, but if it stays warm, then I think spring fishery will be fired up quicker in the shallow water. So when that water strikes 50 in the shallow water, that's when specks can start to show up, and you do catch stripers too, and it can be great stuff.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Sorry, we're live. Sorry.
We're doing a little bit of business here.
We're doing business at a fishing show while doing this. It's all good.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about species. Over the last 10 years, we've seen some new species become a little bit more prominent in the bay. We're looking at cobia, and bull reds are far more prominent than they used to be.
Yep.
How do you see that moving forward in the future? And would you predict any new species coming up?
Well, it's hard to predict because fishing's fishing. You don't know what's going to go day. I could crush it yesterday, and today stinks. It's hard to predict. But with what I've seen with the redfish, since the early 2000s, I've been catching redfish more by accident than targeting. So if guys were targeting back then with the electronics that we have now, maybe it was that good back then. But we didn't know about it. Now we have great electronics. So with that and more guys doing it with the onset of the internet, people know when this stuff's going on. So there's more of them being caught. Cobia, I caught one many years ago. I had a bluefish on a service plug. I'm down on a point lookout. I have a fish that a bluefish ate a service plug. I'm working the plug. I'm working the fish in, and all of a sudden this big brown thing came in behind it. And I'm like, oh my god, what's that? A shark or whatever? And it hit it, ate it. And I caught it. And it was a 56-pound cobia. I never saw a cobia. I didn't know what it was. But that was back in the early 2000s. And then fast forward to a few years ago, the cobia started showing up again. I started catching really dinky ones about 12 years ago, really small ones. And then all of a sudden, the bigger ones started to come in. So evolvement, they seem to be coming in and not leaving. So we're looking pretty good with having cobia. More cobia coming in. What happens out there, though, when cobia are reported, there'll be 100 boats in one small area on a weekend, and that stinks. But on a weekday, you get out there, people sight fish them. I don't sight fish them. I'm not patient enough. So I side image structure with my Humminbird side imaging, and I target fish on structure. And I caught several doing that in the last couple of years, targeting them, seeing fish that I thought maybe were cobia, and then having guys throw a skirted jig head with a 6-inch BKD, and you can catch specks doing that. You can catch stripers doing that, but typically not in summer down south. And you can catch reds and cobia. So I caught all those fish doing that. It's a pretty good thing. So redfish, cobia. I think it's getting better, not worse, but I don't know that for sure. And then specks, we're at the mercy of Mother Nature, if that's going to be better. And we're at the, and they're migratory. Are they going to travel? So I think it's looking good for the future.
So folks that want to book a trip with Walleye Pete, what do? They got to be patient first.
Well, if a person wanted a trip with me, they can get me on my Facebook page. It's Four Seasons Guide Service, or my own page. Pete Dahlberg is on Facebook. I'm Walleye Pete on Instagram, and I don't talk about this much, so I'm trying to figure out what to say. Also, texting me. My number's on my Four Seasons Guide Service page. You can text me anytime, and if you wanted to do a trip, it's best to get a hold of me a couple months ahead of time. Short notice typically doesn't work because I'm usually booked. Thank God for that. But it's not hard to get a trip with me if you look ahead a little bit. And I do walk-on trips once in a while when I have a short notice cancel.
I tell you what, guys, if you get his phone number on his Facebook page or his website, get on the walk-on list because they don't happen often. But if you're the type of guy that can't plan 6 months out, if you get on that walk-on list and you're quick with your thumbs, you can get on it. You can get on his boat every once in a while. What would you say? Probably once a month.
Maybe.
Sometimes
more. Like coming up.
Yeah.
If the power plant fires up a little bit, I'll be doing some fishing at the power plant. No big secret. And if it's good there, I fish. And if it's good, then I'll do walk-on trips.
Right.
So walk-on trips at the plant. If it's good, I don't go out there for 2 or 3 bites. I go check myself and with friends from the neighborhood. And if there's fish there, then I'll fish it. Currently, there's a couple fish here and there, but it's not like on fire. So I'm just not worried about doing it right now.
Well, guys, if you're able to get on his boat, do it now. Don't wait. Spend the money. You're going to learn a ton. A lot of what I know as a fisherman on the bay came from this guy. So don't hesitate. It's going to be well worth the money. Book the whole boat. Pete, it's been a pleasure as always, man.
All right, brother.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And stay tuned. We're going to have one more interview today with the Severn River angler at, 1 o'clock? He's here. But we appreciate it.
All right, man.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
My pleasure.